All right, people, a little bit later than usual, but we are back with our normal Sunday podcast, the Talking TV podcast. We are officially a week into October. I did last week talking about some very interesting kind of return to form movies with Joe of Guy at the Movies, and I'm back with my one and only, my ride or die, Chris the TV Nerd is back because hold on to your butts, people. I know we're bringing out a little bit of other references here, but we got something to talk about. It's Star Wars. And believe it or not, Chris, I'm still trying to figure out exactly how this happened, but we have a Star Wars thing on Disney Plus that is not just good. It's not just passable. It is friggin' great. Like, can you even believe that, first and foremost? Did you ever think we would live to see this day?
Look, it's I'm equally as surprised as you, man. I think we got a lot to talk about here. So
Indeed we do. Indeed we do. All of that and more on tonight's episode of the Talking TV podcast. Stay tuned. Oh, man, Chris, happy day. Happy day indeed. You got the two of us back together. We're talking about something that we both love with Star Wars. We're talking about something that we're both equally well informed by. We're talking about something that I would argue is kind of one of the building foundational blocks of this podcast, and we're doing it for once in a positive light. It's like 2019 came back with a vengeance right now. Like, can we just talk about that for a second? Just how happy I am that all of those kind of things just happened to line up in this perfect time, place, and alignment in order to make sure that that happened.
Please do, because I'm 100% in agreement with you. It's one of those things where all the stars align quite perfectly.
Yeah, it really did. It really did.
And you say it's like bringing it back to 2019, and I understand that because, you know, the start of the podcast and all that. But think about it. We got a new Predator movie this year. And if we're bringing back good vibes and good mojo, we should reference the amazing 2018 The Predator. So I think, and I only bring that up because
Chris, this is why I miss having you on. We don't get to have you on as often as we do, like as we used to. But whenever you come on, we know we're gonna get gems like this.
I only thank you. I appreciate that, but I only bring that up because it seems too good to be true. So I'm just waiting for the impending.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong.
The impending unrendered CGI shot in the third act, if you will, from the Predator 2018 film. Like, where's the Disney Plus in this show?
When is the other shoe going to drop? When's it going to happen?
Exactly.
That, like, okay, this great thing that we have that's so awesome is going to be taken away. Now, real quick, just to clarify your stance, because I feel like we've gone back and forth on this a couple times, and I just want to confirm your stance on this. That 2018 Predator movie, awful to you, right? But also, like, kind of one of those things that's, like, so bad, you look back on it with fondness, you're like, yeah, I do remember watching it. Still terrible, but man, that was a really fun time that I had watching it.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of those, I think, YouTubers 10 years from now, like young kids like us, when we're a little older, they'll be making a YouTube channel and they'll do like their like watch alongs and they'll bring this movie up and they'll make fun of it, but they'll also appreciate it. It's going to grow like that, I think.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I mean, it is Shane Black directing it, so like the movie, like, I don't know. I'm still baffled by that movie just in general. But so, I mean, okay, let's break it down. Let's talk about it, right? We've been talking about Star Wars for a long time on this podcast. I think it's safe to say that people are pretty aware of our stance. I feel like they know our thoughts on, you know, again, we're pretty, I would say, mid at this point on Mandalorian seasons 1 and 2. There are parts about that show that we both like. There's parts about that show that we don't like, but it kind of, I think, did its job as far as setting up the brand identity of what Star Wars was going to look like on Disney Plus. We had the 2 animated efforts from them, which for the most part we both universally loved, between the final season of Clone Wars leading directly into the first season of Bad Batch. For the most part, those were like very, very high on our list as far as things that we really, really appreciated. And then this year, it's safe to say that the 2 live action things we've gotten from Star Wars almost felt like kind of obligatory things where they're like, okay, we have this ability now. We have to make a Boba Fett thing. We have to make an Obi-Wan thing. And the results for those were what they were, you know, where it's like, again, those at their best, those shows were kind of mid, and at their worst, those shows were just everything that we've come to hate about just the modern day Disney blockbuster kind of appetite that we've got, you know? And so naturally, you can imagine my surprise. So obviously, then they announced that Andor is coming later on in the year. You know, they had their big slate that they've got announced. They're like, okay, so as per usual, not as many, but still similar to Marvel. They've got 20 more projects lined up for the next 3 years. And so naturally, I'm just groaning because I'm like, okay, great. That means we're going to be inundated with this stuff for the next couple of years. And it's probably, and just after the level of reception and level that we had to Book of Boba and Obi-Wan, I was already groaning as far as okay, I'm already doing this with Marvel. I had already finally learned to accept Star Wars back into my heart because of Disney Plus. Are we really going to have to do this again? And I saw that Andor was coming out later on in the year, and I had pretty much already written it off, And that was my mistake, because I forget that unlike Book of Boba and Obi-Wan, which are once again attempting to redo exactly what the movies tried to do and failed, which is recapture kind of that those glory days, that nostalgia moment, but with a much lesser budget and a much, I would say, poorer creative team behind the scenes. I forgot that Andor is based off, despite being based off of a recent character, it's still based off of a property of arguably, I would say, one of the few good things that came out of the Disney Star Wars movie era, that being Rogue One. Not only that, but this is the other piece of the puzzle that is crucial to it, which is that unlike Book of Boba and Obi-Wan, which were operating off of new creators that were kind of operating in the new system of Star Wars, Andor is still a little bit old school, because Andor was showrun by Tony Gilroy, who was the person who single-handedly saved Rogue One during production nightmare. Tony Gilroy is a veteran of Hollywood. He's directed and written many incredible movies, one of my favorites being 2007's Michael Clayton. And when the first trailer for this thing came out, I'm immediately like, whoa, are we sure this is still the same Disney Plus Star Wars? It actually looks like it was shot on location. The acting actually looks grounded and dirty. It doesn't look like it has any high fantasy concepts. The story actually looks pretty interesting and engaging. And so I'm like, all right, but trailers are one thing. That's one thing. We got to wait until the show actually comes out before we can actually see what we're going to like. And I watched the first 3 episodes immediately, and it was just one right into the next. I was just immediately blown away. Okay, so that's enough of my spiel, Chris. When I told you about Andor, right? Because I think it's safe to say you had pretty much a lot of similar thoughts to me as far as just the Star Wars that we've gotten so far within 2022. But when you saw that first trailer for Andor, going up to watching those first couple of episodes, walk me through your thought process going into it.
Yeah, when I saw that first trailer, I was intrigued for sure. It looked great. It had a feel that felt like the quality of cinema I was begging Star Wars to return to. It felt mature. It really did. It didn't feel like it was just made to justify your subscription for another 3 months, whereas other properties, Obi-Wan, Mandalorian, which, like you said, we kind of wrote this show off because of how mid it has been so far on this Disney Plus Star Wars experiment. But I think it's one of those things where kind of I learned my lesson, at least as a critic here. Give everything a chance if it's something that you at least are remotely interested in, because you could be surprised. And I was pleasantly surprised here. I really think that Andor has a super mature tone to it, something that honestly doesn't even feel like Star Wars at times. It really kind of feels like I'm watching no comparison to another genre here, because it's still very much so set in the Star Wars universe, but it kind of has vibes of I don't know, it has an HBO feel to it in some of the maturity that I sense, and it's nice, it's intriguing, and it probably is because of Mr. Gilroy's attachment to the show. And again, Rogue One is the only, I'd say, home run that Disney Star Wars has hit until now. So
yeah, I couldn't agree with that more completely. It's fascinating to me just exactly what it is that when you take kind of what it is that Disney and the higher ups at the corporate marketing ever since kind of the new phase that Disney has been in since COVID, and you kind of conglomerate that with what they think viewers want versus what they actually want, And I find it interesting that, again, in this era where just more and more of the creativity is being stripped away from the filmmakers, how you finally seemingly have a property from them that actually feels creatively driven. There's nothing about this show that feels corporatized, if that makes any sense. And I know that always sounds strange whenever we're talking about something coming from Disney, but it's this idea that, again, this is the first Disney thing that is more than 6 to 9 episodes. Everything that we've gotten from Disney Plus so far has been between 6 to 9 episodes. Most of the Marvel things have been 6 episodes. The Mandalorian, both seasons have been 8 episodes. Book of Boba was 7. This is the first thing they have basically bookmarked this. They already had set this up. This is going to be 2 12-episode seasons. So already they're actually just treating it like a real TV show, first and foremost. That was the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed was that it's like, okay, they're actually giving the story room to breathe. You know, we're 5 episodes in, that we're already going to be hitting the halfway point this week. And I would make an argument that we still don't exactly know where the plot, quote unquote, is going, but that's not a bad thing because I'm just enjoying the ride that we're on so much, you know? We're actually getting time to actually get to know these characters, right? I remember that I still remember back in the day that one of the biggest criticisms coming out of Rogue One was the fact that it felt like we didn't get enough time to know those characters, so we didn't have enough of an emotional attachment to them when we saw them all get killed off at the end. Now, while I personally didn't agree with that, I completely understand where people are coming from with that, because there's only so much time you could do when you're telling that level of a story in a 2 hour plus time frame, you know, versus this one. Again, it's kind of everything that we've been talking about, I feel like, that we've wanted from these extended TV projects that are meant to kind of support the movies, right? There's only so much that people are going to be able to watch just in general. I feel like Marvel's having a big problem with this as far as being able to justify that the TV shows are just as worthy of watching as far as their importance to the story as the movies are, you know? And I feel like the biggest reason why they've been failing is because it is so abundantly clear, especially now with the She-Hulk garbage that's on right now, that the same level of attention and detail that they put into the movies, as few and far between as that is, at the very least, the movies are still getting more love. It is just not getting put into the TV shows at all. And what's worse is not only are they treating it like TV, quote unquote, but they're treating it like regular TV, not the kind of TV that we love. This is not the case with this one at all. They very clearly are treating this like a TV show that is meant to support the greater overall narrative. So it's one of those things that perfectly hits all the tangents, where you don't feel like you're doing homework having to watch the show. You feel like you're watching something that feels exclusive in and of its own thing. And then once you realize the connective tissue that it has to this greater overall universe, it just makes it that much more of a rewarding watch, which is something that I feel like almost everything that's been on Disney Plus has missed so far.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head with that. It is very well said. I can tell doing those 80 extra episodes of podcasting with Pat for Talking Thrones really paid off, because that was well said. But let me add,
hey man, if you want, go back and listen to the Bells. I was just listening to it today. We got the Iron Throne dropping next week, and I would argue the Bells is the greatest podcast that I've ever put out. That's not tooting my own horn. I'm just saying.
Damn. All right. Trust me. I listen. When an artist claims their apex, you should always go and check it out. It's kind of how I feel about George Lucas with Howard the Duck. Like that. No, seriously.
Please tell me he actually said that. Please tell me that he actually said
he
that.
Didn't.
Okay.
He didn't. It's
that
me.
would be
That's
amazing if he did.
That's me projecting, but I really wish that was the case, because it feels like it, right? Because Howard the Duck, and please, I'm going somewhere with this, I promise.
I love it. Just keep it going.
There's only so much you can do with it. It is a contained sort of story. It before it even gets off the ground, it has a clear end. And I feel the same exact way about Andor. So it's almost like an experiment. How much can we do with this character in the short amount of time that we have? Because the overarching canon already predicates so much of what he's allowed to do. And on top of that, we've seen him die already. And I gotta say, man, it's like the classic thing with artists where a lot of if you read any great classic rock or any filmmaker's biography, 9 times out of 10, it's like, my best work came when my back was against the wall and I was just trying to make it. And I had only one way out, and it was to get through. And I feel like with Andor being such they have such a narrow needle to thread here because of the limitations of the canon, where he's already been, what's already happened to him, that you really, I think this makes you think. This is like a puzzle that you kind of have to unlock to write this thing, and it needs to be handled more so than a cash grab. And then this could have flopped. I think this could have been absolutely horrible. Went the way of Obi-Wan, unfortunately. Went the way of Mandalorian and Boba Fett. I mean, that's like Titanic Part 2. But it's just like,
and not the box office part of it.
No, definitely not. But they honestly, they did what I was hoping they would do for the entirety of the Disney Star Wars run, which was actually make smart Star Wars. Like if there was a politician running that really cared about Star Wars, like, make smart Star Wars again. Like, that would be a great campaign ad, because say what you will about the prequels, say what you will about any of Star Wars prior. Obviously it's never been like the sci-fi that was super highbrow, but it at least had depth, and it at least had like a certain level of quality, and that clearly has not been there throughout the Disney Plus run. But I don't know, this Rogue One, these rebels that are just trying to find their way through the galaxy seem to be the best part so far. I don't know. What's your take on all that, man?
Well, I think your first mistake was giving a politician any credit for, and we're trying to make a comparison to say, yeah, if a politician was intelligent, I think that was your first mistake, because that's already giving politicians way, way too much credit there.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, I 100% agree. You're right, because it's always been kind of fascinating to me as far as it's like, because again, a big part of, I feel like, our podcasting just over the last like year and a half during the pandemic was real. Me, I took a large portion of time as far as to really figure out, like, okay, clearly we both, in our little film bubble that we're in, right? We have clearly gotten to this level of the stuff that we love and appreciate is so far surpassed kind of what the average viewer that I'm not going to say that we're guilty of this, but I would definitely say we've gotten to a point where it's like, we may have lost kind of what it is that regular people actually like viewing. So I will definitely say that kind of in my like little COVID bubble that I was in this last year, I was doing a lot of work. I was doing a lot of research and trying to figure out, okay, what is it exactly that is still drawing people to this sort of thing that we are missing? Again, people like us, people like Critical Trigger, again, we have been criticizing and raising to the ground pretty much every single big budget property that has been coming out from these studios, specifically from Disney. Warner Brothers still is a little bit guilty of this as well. Amazon now is officially on that bandwagon as well with the whole Lord of the Rings thing. That's a podcast for another day. But the thing that I feel like I've come to the conclusion of is that the thing that the studios I feel like are having the hardest time with, and that's taking out kind of all the political edge of it, is trying to figure out something that appeals blatantly to everyone, which I think is the toughest thing that any creative is having in today's day and age. Because again, there's so many different metrics, there's so many different outlets, the amount of content that is being pumped out, it is just to a tantamount fold that is like impossible. It's barely possible for people in our film bubble. It's impossible for people who are just like kind of, the regular people who just want to chill out after a day of work and just relax and zone out in front of the TV and just watch something engaging. It's impossible because there's 50 million different streaming services to pick from. Yeah.
I've actually been having a hard time like the past, I don't know, maybe 2 months, like with my downtime, because it's obviously not as much as it has been. And I know you're in the same boat. Like I've been actually feeling what people feel outside of our bubble here. Like, oh my God, I just want to relax, but I don't know what to pick because this just came out, this just came out, this just came out. But I'm behind.
And then you just end up scrolling through TikTok for 2 hours until you fall asleep.
Dude, Instagram for me, but yeah, it sucks. I hate
it's bad.
That might be a podcast for another day, but
we might have to have that podcast before the end of the year, as far as like, the content pump and dump. Yeah. So, and obviously, again, we know that the studio's emphasis has been on quantity over quality, just because, again, of the emphasis that was put on streaming during the pandemic and the fact that all these studios needed something in this time period where they were losing a ton of money, and now they're essentially in like retrograde now, where they're just trying to reverse, pull back. They're like, okay, we got to focus. Exactly. Put stuff back in studios, all that crap. I'm going somewhere with this. Don't worry. And essentially, so I feel like what the quandary that we're in, especially with Star Wars, and I feel like kind of the difficulty that we've always had, that we've been having with Star Wars, with the creativity, right? So we know that obviously with the movies, there was no plan that was put into the main trilogy, right? Which was the mistake there, and just how everyone has been criticizing the management over there, And I feel like it's so strange because in a strange way, I feel like Kathleen Kennedy's management of the movies during a disastrous last couple of years was sort of in a way ahead of its time, where they were like, okay, that thought mentality that she was having, where it's like, okay, have this main trilogy and then have all these other movies to supplant that source material, that would have been perfect if Disney Plus had been a thing in 2015, right? Because I feel like people were like still just getting used to it. Streaming was just becoming a thing, but we weren't so overcrowded with all this content. There was still, I feel like, this level, they still had this level of trust from audiences that they would have been, I feel like, more open to a lot of the stuff that came out. And so I feel like it really was a matter of timing, where, again, I feel like if we were getting all this stuff, I feel like if we had gotten all these kind of training wheel shows out of the way in like 2015, 2016, I feel like we would have been in a different spot. And I feel like we would have had just like a lot more stuff right now, right? So I feel like kind of the point that I'm getting to is that, well, it definitely feels like there definitely is an argument to be made that Andor could be too little too late. Just the fact that we're getting it now in this time period is amazing to me, to say the least.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a good point. Is it too little too late, right?
Right.
I would say, listen, they've lost already who they would have lost. I mean, the mistakes have been made. Boba Fett. Come on. do I have to say any more?
Yeah.
And then Obi-Wan to add insult to injury, right? Like not too shortly after that. It's been a rough year for Star Wars. But I think people who love Star Wars, even if they've become disenfranchised, like myself, we will still go where we hear that getting is good. And Andor has definitely brought me back in. Now I'm still on a rocky road here with Disney Plus, but it's certainly carried enough good favor with me to keep me going for at least a little while longer. Whereas if you didn't tell me, dude, you have to watch Andor, I wasn't going to watch it. I'm not going to lie.
Right.
If it wasn't for your
I was in
opinion,
the same boat. I was in the exact same boat.
So yes, they did lose me, but I think if people give this a chance, there is a chance that they'll be brought back in like I was. And it's not to say I've stopped loving Star Wars any less. It's just I'm frustrated with, again, speaking to your point, the way it's being handled right now. And I do think what you said about Kathleen Kennedy and her sort of being like the, Kevin Feige of Star Wars.
Them attempted to position her as the Kevin Feige of Lucasfilm.
Yeah, I think like it's one of those things where it's a great point. I think looking back in hindsight, if Disney Plus was around, perhaps maybe Solo would have been a Disney Plus drop. Maybe it would have been a miniseries, and who knows? I mean, because I've always enjoyed his portrayal of the character. Forgive me, I'm forgetting the actor's name right now, but the point stands. And yeah, totally. Rogue One was absolutely phenomenal. And imagine if that was like a miniseries as well in between like flagship movies, the Skywalker trilogy, right? I don't know. I think looking back on it, she was given really a rough go of things. Not trying to write her a pass by any means, because there were really talented people she could have called upon more, like Favreau and Filoni, which she just didn't for the films. But I mean, Carrie Fisher's passing definitely throws a wrench into things. Also, I think there was a lot of just drama around the films, and there was always big shoes to fill. I mean, those were colossal shoes to fill. If Marvel had a hard time going after Endgame, Star Wars had a hard time getting off the ground with Disney.
Right
I mean, it's a similar
the whole
thing.
problems with Lucas behind the scenes, the fact that they kind of essentially bullied Lucas into selling it in the beginning, the fact that Filoni was still busy wrapping up Rebels, and then obviously the whole transition into live action. Not to mention, I still think the biggest perpetrator, it's so funny to me, again, I know he's your guy, but I still think that the biggest culprit is J.J. Abrams, because the whole thing was that when they were launching Lucasfilm, they had put all their chips into The Force Awakens, and they were banking on J.J. to deliver them something, right? And the problem there inherently comes from the fact that J.J. intentionally ended Force Awakens on a cliffhanger with absolutely no plans going forward as well. And then obviously once they entrusted Rian Johnson with handling The Last Jedi and kind of that 1-2 punch and back and forth, it really just kind of screwed them nonstop, Now, again, part of that is on Kennedy, but again, the whole thing is that Kennedy went into it again with a very Spielbergian producerial method in mind, which is that she's going to trust the creators. And the creators in this case, I'm sorry to say, they really didn't come through. JJ and Ryan really both screwed the pooch as far as just their whole kind of, they're both their kind of like individual artistic flares that, again, for better or for worse, again, JJ's movies are problematic. Ryan's movies are problematic. How many actual successes do those two have outside of like the shit from them that we really love,
That's the thing. You say JJ is my guy, and at a time, certainly he was, and I still love what I love.
I still remember those community college days.
Yeah, I've come around, I think. There's something to being a jack of all trades, but there's also the master of none. And I feel like JJ floats somewhere in between. I feel like JJ floats somewhere in between that realm now, unfortunately. Oh man, I didn't I did not think that would hit you that hard.
That was the best joke that I think you've made on this entire thing. There's a thing to be said about the jack of all trades, but there's also the master of none. And I don't think I've ever heard a better description of J.J. Abrams in my life. He's so good at everything that he sucks at doing one thing.
Yeah, dude.
And that's ending something.
It's tough. It is tough because I love Lost and I love Cloverfield, but then I fucking hate Force Awakens, and I can't stand the ending to that trilogy, and that one Mission Impossible movie, sure, but that's so easy. Like it's hard to mess that up.
Yeah, because Tom Cruise is running the show. He literally is a glorified TV director with a good sense of visuals, and that's about it. You know,
Yeah, exactly.
people still hate his Star Trek movies. I don't agree with them, but because I think that's just, Star Trek fans that are a little bit too up in arms about their precious property. But yeah, it's like, come on, dude. But I will say that the same cannot be said for Tony Gilroy. So let's leave all the bad stuff behind. Let's actually talk about like some of the good here. So obviously, again, the biggest thing obviously that I think is still like kind of a source of confusion and like hilarity to me is the fact that Tony Gilroy, while again being credited as the person for saving Rogue One behind the scenes, is still not the person that is credited as director. Like you were speaking to about some of that behind the scenes Star Wars drama, that all started with Rogue One. Because as we know, aside from Force Awakens and Last Jedi, every other major Star Wars movie that came out in those 5 years had a director shift. Rogue One shifted from Gareth Edwards to Tony Gilroy, who reshot that entire third act. Solo famously went from Phil Lord and Chris Miller to Ron Howard, who, from what I understand, reshot that entire movie. Colin Trevorrow, if I could speak, was originally supposed to direct Rise of Skywalker before that transitioned back to JJ, and well, the rest speaks for itself. And so I find it really fascinating where Rogue One was the one instance of a behind-the-scenes director shift where said director who took over the movie was not given credit aside from on the story. You see his name in the script, and arguably, again, made one of the best Star Wars things we've ever gotten. And the fact that Disney actually had the Disney executives over at Disney Plus and Lucasfilm actually had the foresight to understand that that those parts of the film were the parts that people enjoyed the most from that. I think it's safe to say, again, there's a reason why, again, just the grounded, very mature feeling that Rogue One generated, and the fact that that movie actually took a much more mature stance on its characters and developed, I think, a real pathos with that ending. That ending still hits and is one of the most effective third acts, I think, of the last decade. And the fact that they had the foresight in order to let Gilroy continue that tone and then some into this, like, again, it's one of those things where I really don't feel like I'm watching a Star Wars thing at certain points. I feel like I'm watching like this spy espionage thriller, like kind of it feels like it's got all of like the smash and grab heist elements that we see from, like stuff like Mandalorian and like that I saw like week after week after week when I was watching Clone Wars and Rebels back in the day, but like done with an actual like mature tone. It's like, oh my God, it's like an actual filmmaker made this. What is happening, And it also speaks to my earlier point as far as like Star Wars, I feel like has always had recent Star Wars, I should say, has always had a problem because, again, this is a thing that I see with a lot of big budget properties as far as figuring out what demographic they're making for. They're making this for kids, or they're making this for adults, or are they making this for some weird mix of the two? I feel like that's been a huge problem recently as far as figuring that out, because back in the day, we didn't have that problem because people were just trying to, make the best thing that they could. And now it feels like we have to have all these demographics and all these checkboxes like, okay, is this for this demographic? Is this for this demographic? Is this for this demographic? And it feels like they are always prioritizing that over making something good,
Yeah, exactly, man. No, it's kind of everything I've been looking for a very long time. Not just Star Wars. I mean, just in general. It feels to me almost like a Slow Horses maturity level, except minus the really cool sort of factor that just comes from it being a British show. I don't know what it is
and
about
on Apple
that.
TV.
What's up, Eric? What are we doing right now? We're podcasting about Andor.
Yeah, guess what? HBO preserves House of the Dragon for us, so we don't have to watch it when it comes out immediately at 9.
Hopefully, yeah. I haven't even... Oh man, you want to talk about? Never mind. But anyways,
save that for later. Save that bit for later.
It's everything I've been looking for. It is absolutely right up my alley. I mean, where has been a mature, thrilling space espionage sci-fi series? It's here. It's finally here because I think they're taking out the Disney-ified aspects that absolutely kill me. Those little stupid quips that irk me to my core. Those fucking moments where they like give the B character like what the hero's supposed to obtain, and like it's just like the focus on the central character here is awesome. Like, remember when we were reviewing Boba Fett and there was like, I think there was the mini Mandalorian season, Mandalorian 1.5
right
or whatever.
And again,
right in the middle,
seven episodes. It would have been one thing if that had 12 episodes like this show. In 7 episodes, it did that. Like, man,
yeah, and the fact that this is running for 12 episodes and then another 12 episode season really just is, if it keeps up the pace, right? It's got to keep up the pace. But so far, it reminds me of the filmmaking of a show that I'm kind of watching very slowly right now, but working my way through, which is HBO's newest detective show, Tokyo Vice.
Yes.
And it kind of, in a sense, that's when I say HBO, it feels like the central character in that show sort of going through the motions, piecing together the pieces, trying his best to muddy his way through the severity of the situation. We're not doing a review on that show right now, but it's like a similar mature storytelling that I never thought I'd see in Star Wars. And I think that's great because it's offering a breath of fresh air. The way that everyone is playing their role here is phenomenal. And I know you're learning so much about acting right now, but I mean, I just feel like Diego Luna has absolutely just dominated every second of his role in this show so far. He's thrilling. He's exciting. He makes you feel bad for him at times because he owes everyone money. He's just trying his best to get by. It's a tough galaxy. It really is. The Empire, they drive a hard bargain, and it's not easy. And I feel like other Star Wars shows have kind of, I feel like looking back on it, Rey quite literally just stumbles into every ideal situation until the end of the trilogy. Where is this? Okay, the First Order's here. The hand is around the neck of the civilians of the galaxy, stronger than ever before, right? I mean, that's what you at least told us, and it never felt like that was the case. The severity of the situation never felt like what I was being told it was. Whereas here in Andor, maybe because it is a little smaller in scale, but maybe that's a bad argument too, because what was Obi-Wan and what was Boba Fett, right? But and Mandalorian, but maybe because it is a little smaller in scale and they're actually writing to the tone that we expect and hope for, maybe that's why it's so impactful. I'm just trying to figure out what makes this different than the other Disney Star Wars shows, because it really is. It's like a league of its own so far.
Yeah, well, the biggest thing for me that I noticed first off is, again, just actual direction of actors first and foremost, right? And I feel like that again, it's so weird because I don't want to sound like that pretentious guy. I was like, oh, I'm in acting school, I actually understand it. But I'm starting to understand a lot more of the intricacies and behind the scenes things that go into direction. And I'm starting to understand a lot more when actors talk about how difficult it is to actually act in front of a green screen, or in this case, an LED screen, right? Whatever. We know obviously about all the new technology that Disney is, right? So that's kind of first and foremost, where again, you can tell that a lot of this stuff is actually shot on location. And you can tell that there's actually, or at least that's how good the LED stuff has gotten, So that I think is first and foremost, where you could tell that this is a story where the actors are actually being given real direction and actual real stakes as far as how to portray their characters, Number two is the fact that, and this is always such a really weird, tricky, tight wire act to pull as far as mixing in the legacy characters with the new stuff. But I think this is another one of those things that's helped by the fact that Cassian Andor, well, yes, he does technically qualify as a legacy character. We don't have the same kind of baggage with him that we do with Boba Fett, with Obi-Wan. I think, again, the reason why The Mandalorian, the reason why we still consider why that show works better is because even though it's still kind of the same level of quality of Book of Boba and Obi-Wan, those are still, for the most part, original characters. So there's still some level of interest, some level of intrigue, some level of unknown that we don't know about, Cassian Andor, we've only known for the last 6 years, as opposed to Obi-Wan, who we've known for the last 20, or Boba Fett, who we've known for the last 30 to 40, There's so many years of baggage that come with that character, and it doesn't help that both those shows were just done absolutely horribly, if you ask me, Although apparently not Obi-Wan, because apparently a lot more people like Obi-Wan than I thought, which we'll come back to that one in a bit.
I think it's that's a weird conversation, because I just
really
think
weird,
so
because
much
that
of
was
it is the star power and just showing
Is it though?
what
'Cause it's
star power can do. Because the arguments I hear from people who try and defend it are, but Ewan McGregor. And I said, yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
Ewan McGregor was so unlike the Obi-Wan that we would have expected.
I'd argue
at this
that
point in time.
I would argue this was Ewan McGregor's worst performance as Obi-Wan if we're gonna go down that rabbit hole, But
Exactly.
like I said, it's
we already have that podcast on the channel, if I remember
we do,
correctly,
but again,
right?
it's the thing that separates. It's the thing that separates us from everyone else. Well, again, when we ask people why they like it, then we break down all the things that we didn't like, and we actually get people to stop and think for 5 seconds. They're like, "Oh yeah, I guess," but I just liked it. You shouldn't think so much. It's a movie. The things that make me want to to drive nails through my eyes. But what's it called? Yeah, so that's the first thing. The second thing is the fact that, oh crap, I already lost my point where I was going with this. But I guess the point being is that it actually does feel like what's it called? So we don't have all this baggage with all these characters, right? So for the most part, like you said, right, it's almost kind of got the Better Call Saul thing going for it as far as a prequel, where we ultimately know what the end game is, but the creators understand that. And so kind of almost the fun of watching it is knowing and seeing, kind of like being led along this path of, it's like, okay, how is this going to lead to the Cassian that we know in Rogue One? Because like I said, one of the most fun and fascinating things about Better Call Saul with those earlier seasons was seeing how Odenkirk was playing Jimmy McGill differently, significantly differently than how he played Saul Goodman in Breaking Bad. And so kind of that evolution, that journey of seeing that transition to the character that we are familiar with, I think is where we also get a lot of intrigue from, because this is not the same Cassian Andor that we know from Rogue One. Like, the thing that was so cool about Cassian Andor in Rogue One that I think, again, so many people just overlooked, again, just because of the nature of that movie, because of how fast-paced they had to move. And that movie, again, ultimately, at the end of the day, was very focused on plot over character. Like, that was the first time we'd ever seen a Star Wars character, a good guy, shoot another good guy for self-preservation on screen. That never happened before in Star Wars. It was always, scoundrels and rogues and bad guys, so that already injected a sense of moral gray into Star Wars that we'd never gotten before. That's the first thing. Then, on top of that, now you have his origin, where it's like, okay, so now we get to see Cassian before even that. At the very least, then he was doing shit in the name of the rebellion. He was doing all that dirty shit. Now it's like he's just trying to survive on his own. Like I said, it's a rough and tumble world ultimately. He's just doing what he can to survive. He's ripping joints. And this first episode just shows that, like, again, he got held up and was just like defending himself, and he just happened to kill two of the wrong people, and it ends up causing this whole skirmish that ends up reaching all the way up to the highest levels of the Empire. And it's like, again, all of this intrigue where you could tell that they actually put some level of thought and detail into the story, where you're like, things are actually happening for a reason, because they are being motivated by character decisions. All the things that I feel like we've been talking about for 4 years now on this podcast, as far as what makes the stories that we love.
It doesn't just feel like an asteroid plopped down in front of Rey or Boba or Obi-Wan,
or in this case the Hardfoots from Lord of the Rings, if we're going that way. Yes, that actually happens in the first episode of Lord of the Rings.
Well, what's on that asteroid is where things get interesting, Dom. A script, and a really shittily written script, but one that for some reason all the characters end up going along with. It doesn't feel like that happened here. It feels like it wasn't just dropped out of thin air, all willy-nilly, just have fun, take this and do whatever you want with it. Yeah, it's decent. Just, go off and have fun, actors, play. This actually feels like he was given, like you said, something really substantial. It is so organic in a sense. I mean, it feels like, wow, yeah, he did kill some guys he shouldn't have. It was a real shitty situation. They would not leave him alone. He was just a man in dire straits to begin with. He defended himself, but unfortunately, this isn't a fair galaxy. Also, he killed someone, so does that void his defense? Murder's murder, right? And so it really has these real-world, tangible stakes that we just haven't had. I think that's been the problem with Disney Star Wars so far. They did a good job with making it feel fun and grandiose and making it have the Hollywood blockbuster effect, but what were, I think, the original Star Wars films driven by? Not the most intense stakes, not the greatest, mature, in-depth writing of all time, but like still every decision by the characters felt, one, real, even though it wasn't a galaxy far, far away, and two, it mattered. It impacted something. Whereas I don't really, Obi-Wan doesn't matter. Right. In fact, all it does is rewrite some canon. Right. Boba Fett definitely doesn't matter. He doesn't even matter. He's not in the 25% of the show. But this matters. It might not matter in the grand scale of the overarching Star Wars universe, but but it immerses you and it matters to Cassian Andor, and it really sucks you in and does what I've been dying for them to do, honestly.
I couldn't agree more with any of those points. You were just on fire with those zingers tonight. You're like, Boba Fett didn't even matter in his own show. Again, hitting the nail on the head. We are just getting all the baggage out of our system. Now, I have one last topic written for tonight, and it's interesting because I feel like most of the time, I feel like we always have a dead set direction that we're going to go with this, but I have a different direction that I'm going to go with this one. And of course, I said, what does this bode for the future. And in the past, we've always talked about kind of what we want from Star Wars going forward and where this is going to lead creatively. And I feel like in the past, that's always led us down a rabbit hole because, like I said, every single time we say a point like that, we always get burned because we get this one thing that we love, and then the next 2 to 3 products are crap, complete and utter crap. And while I'm hoping that we don't get this for the case going forward, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do something different. I'm going to look back at what we've gotten before, and I'm not just applying this to Star Wars. I'm applying this to a lot of different things because I feel like there's kind of a sense of change that's going on in the air right now. I want to kind of try and sit back and analyze it for a bit and try and see and figure out if I'm right as far as where the directions are going, because I've been trying to do this for a while now as far as predicting where things go. Sometimes I've been pretty right, other times I've been very wrong, and I just want to see where this is going. So I feel like the last 20 years of cinema, what we've gotten is, again, just the fact of Hollywood finally learning how to perfect big budget visual spectacle. And I think it peaks in 2009 with Avatar, right? I think that's where it peaks. That's when they're like, okay, we finally got this. We finally learned how to make this real or realistic looking. We are finally essentially able to begin the transmogrification of movies into theme park rides, right? People getting like these visual experiences, right? We've gotten that, right? And then we pretty much got that for a decade, right? Just a decade full of just these visual, sensationalized things where the story that we were watching and the characters that we were watching didn't necessarily matter because we were getting such a thrill ride and a rush from the visuals, right? But it got to a point where people started getting sick of that. And people started getting tired of it, And I think it all capped in 2019 because I think it's very, very timely where Martin Scorsese comes out and makes his comments about the state of cinema the same year that Endgame comes out, arguably the apex of Marvel, again. And obviously, again, we were followed by a year and a half of a pandemic where ultimately, again, Hollywood and the world was just kind of in this stalemate, just trying to figure stuff out. But now that we're starting to come out of it, and now that we're again seeing this kind of abrupt shift again back towards theater and back towards big budget filmmaking, and we're kind of seeing again, or at least I'm hoping that the studios are starting to realize that they can't keep hiding behind the visual prowess because not only are the effects the effects that they've been coasting on for about a decade are already starting to look dated by comparison, but they're trying to now also stretch it out into TV, and that's where it's really showing. Because again, with TV is a medium that made its bones on storytelling. You can't get away with that for as long as just by coasting on visuals the same way that you can in, say, maybe a 2 to 3 hour long movie. You just can't ultimately because it's just so much more time that you're asking your viewers to invest in. And like I said, just the gluttony of products that are coming out are not helping either. But what I'm hoping, like I said, this is what's left of the idealist in me. What I'm hoping is that with the vast amounts of big budget spectacle that I'm seeing that are actually, I think, for the most part, pretty good, where you can tell that there's actually some thought put into the writing, into the characters. They're not just all about showing you flashy visuals. So a couple of examples that come to mind. Dune. What's it called? Obviously this and/or I think House of the Dragon as well on HBO. These things where they're finally learning that people don't just want blockbuster visual scale anymore, right? They're going back and looking at all the things that worked, all the things that didn't work. And I'm hoping, again, I could be proven very wrong in the next couple of years, and I still think it's going to take a long time for us to get to a point, but I'm hoping that what we see going forward is, again, we're still going to get our small-scale stories on TV, and we're going to get our big-budget-level entertainment, visual spectacle entertainment on the big screen. That's not changing. That's not going away. And I think also that Top Gun had a big part to play in this as well, for better or for worse. But you're going to start to hopefully see, I think, some more emphasis put on the story and mixing the story in with the visuals a little bit more. Because that's at least what I'm seeing from Andor. That's what I'm seeing from House of the Dragon. That's what I'm seeing from things like Dune. Like I said, it's going to take a while before we get there, but I'm hoping that we're getting in that we're going more so in the direction. I don't know, Chris, you think I'm just being another, complete moronic idealist? Or you think I might have some things that I'm getting at?
No, I think your case certainly has validity. I mean, just think about it. Like Top Gun Maverick was absolutely a game-changing film.
Yeah.
Because it kind of, in a way, was a passion project. Sure,
kind
Paramount.
Of, sorta.
Yeah, like sure, Paramount was in the era of reboots, probably thrilled that Tom Cruise was fired up about making one and had been working on a Top Gun Maverick, a sequel to Top Gun for a long time. But I think it's success and the sort of essence around the film makes it so that yeah, creator stories are successful too. There's something about franchising and continuing a narrative across movie to movie to movie to movie and then TV show to movie, like we've seen Marvel do, and the whole Disney Plus Star Wars experiment, and everything really Disney's done to change cinema, which, say what you will about it. Personally, I think it's no secret to everyone in our audience. I side with Martin Scorsese a little more than I would maybe with the Disney people on that whole debate, but its impact is, you just can't deny it. I mean, unless you want to, and I think you're not allowing yourself to see the full picture, because the fact that Top Gun Maverick, yes, was still a reboot, and probably now will go on to be a franchise. It was a creator-owned project. Tom Cruise made it out of passion. He took time to craft the story. They weren't just pumping it out because it's Q3 and we need our Marvel drop, and we need our coinciding Disney Plus drop. And shoot, well, Q4 is coming up. We got to justify the subscribers. It kind of, Top Gun Maverick had the perfect blend of everything. It had the excitement, it had the spectacle, but it also had why I love action movies of the 80s so much. It had that narrative that I feel we're getting with Andor. The attention to detail on the story and the passion behind the performances. Whereas, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed my time with Thor: Love and Thunder, but just using this as an example, as I'm just plugging from the well here, but it relied a lot, that movie, and a lot of Marvel has relied a lot on, in my opinion, with like Doctor Strange and Thor, what the characters have done in the past, to sort of be like, well, yeah, of course you like these guys. They fought Thanos. They did this. They did that. And it also relied on like the formula. And I think the formula is not really selling as strongly as it used to. It's not necessarily good enough to get by. And so, yeah, I do think there's a shift. I think it's happening slower than maybe you just predicted.
Yeah, it's definitely going to happen a lot slower, and it's going to take a while before we get there. But like I said, because the biggest thing that I noticed with Top Gun, and again, my personal thoughts on the movie, I have to take completely out of this argument, because I feel like when it comes to talking about something like Top Gun, just the success factor alone, it's like, obviously just my personal thoughts on that movie are not going to have a bearing on anybody wanting to go and see it, because it literally seems like, again, we've joked about this all the time, but it feels, we joked about this with Spider-Man with Last Christmas, but it feels like that's the only movie that people have been willing to go out of their way and actually go to a theater and see this weekend. Like, put it this way, we had forget the Marvel shit, we had a Batman movie come out in theaters this year. A Batman movie. The most, I would say, one of the top 3 to 5 most popular superheroes of all time, who for the most part has never had an abject failure of a film. And how many people are still talking about that movie? How many people even bother to see that in theaters versus just waiting for it to drop on HBO Max, versus Top Gun, which, again, everybody has watched, is the most successful movie of the year, is kind of arguably, I would say, the studio's reasoning for wanting to put movies back in theaters now, as opposed to just letting everything go to streaming. And again, it's, say what you will, again, it is passion filled. They had wanted to make that movie for years. It brought back everybody's feeling of nostalgia from that first one, which, say what you will about the thoughts on that first one. That first one was a pop culture phenomenon when it came out, and that shit felt real. It felt visceral. It felt like an experience. Like, when you were inside those cockpits with those guys, you felt that shit, because they did not shoot that on a green screen. They shot that in the air, all practically, ludicrous as the plot of that movie was. I still couldn't tell you who their enemy was. I still couldn't tell you what the hell that whole third act was, whether or not the whole movie was a Tom Cruise fever dream that he actually died in the movie, and the rest of it is just like, like a whole like afterlife thing. That's a great fan theory, by the way. If anybody gets a chance to check that out, they totally should. But it's like, it's one of those things where, whether or not I like the movie or not, I completely understand why people love it as much as they do and why it has been successful as it has. And like, it shows.
It's exactly why I think it just shows like the veteran critic in you to take out your thoughts on Top Gun Maverick. I think the sentiment and what that film did for the theaters, the industry, is really the core of answering your question. I think, yeah, shift has started. I think that could be seen as the shift. The let's say the inciting incident for the shift, just to speak in film terms, but we're only at the start of that movie. And how will that plot unfold? I'm not sure. But one thing I am sure of is look, people love their men in tights, okay?
Yes, they do.
Look at the WWE. It's been around forever, but there's been periods where if you go and you watch those WWE documentaries or you listen to some interviews, like they've had to reinvent themselves and they've had to figure out why are our viewers leaving us now? What is different about this era that wasn't different 2 years ago? And I think Marvel needs to kind of take a look at their men in tights and reassess, you know? Because WWE is bigger and better than ever right now, but that's not to say without a real struggle period in like the late 90s, early 2000s. And they're kind of like the first, if they're a good example, I think, because they're kind of like the first streaming service, Disney Plus type thing, or continuous narrative, if you will, where it's just like it never stops. It just keeps going. If they kept counted phases like Marvel did, WWE's got to be in like phase
They'd be in
2000.
what phase? Yeah, right. Phase 200 or something like that.
Yeah, more 200 probably more so realistically, but like yeah, and it's just like there's been highs and there's been lows, and they have a formula, but it's flexible. And I think Marvel kind of needs to, while they're still on top, I think if they want to stay on top, Disney and Marvel and the machine that is Star Wars and all, this conglomerate, they should learn from things like Andor and maybe reassess. That's what I hope happens from this. That's the shift I hope that Top Gun Maverick is going to help inspire. Will it happen? I feel like we've been having this conversation on the podcast for almost 4 years now, so I'm not sure. But at least that's what rebellions are built on hope.
Rebellions are built on hope. That's exactly it. That's the perfect note. That is the perfect note to end on. I love it. Before we get out of here, Chris, your final thoughts and star ratings for what you've seen of Andor so far.
Sure. Yeah. So far it is a 4.5 out of 5. I think I gotta wait until it's done, which I'd love to do finale review with you, Dom, and catch our thoughts on this if our schedules permit. But if this is all we get, then I'll leave you with this. This is the Star Wars I've been looking for, and it's really fun so far. I hope it continues at the speed it's at the level of emotional detail that it's been at, because man, I find myself finally thinking I could rewatch something other than the prequels and the original trilogy. And that'd be so great because I love Star Wars so much.
I couldn't agree with you more. Again, I've never had the same sentiment towards Star Wars that you and other people have, but I always recognize good stuff when it comes out. And I have liked a lot that's come out of Star Wars, especially recently. And this is bringing back, like I said, the stuff from Clone Wars, the stuff from Rebels, the stuff from Bad Batch, the stuff from Rogue One that I've loved so much about Star Wars. Again, just making it about the little people in Star Wars. Screw the lightsabers, screw the Force, screw the Empire, screw all that shit. Just give me the shit about the little people. That's all I care about. Send them on missions, have them do cool stuff, have them taking down establishments and institutions, bring on the anarchy. Let's fucking go. 4.5 out of 5 stars. I'm loving every minute of it. I cannot wait to see what comes from the rest of the show. But most importantly, Chris, I'm super happy to have you back with us again. Even if we only get you in small doses now, it's always a treat whenever we have you on. Where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Yeah, no, it was an absolute pleasure. I love this community. I love doing this show, and tonight was a lot of fun. We had some good laughs, I will say.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, but guys, nothing's changed. Just a little more busy, that's all. But you can still find me at all the same places at Christian Evanko. That is Evanko spelled Evanko. I make music, which you can find through the link in my bio. I have a show with Professor Pat that's a monthly sort of music celebration live stream where we bring a band into the studio to rock out for us. And that's called Our Band Show. And it's at Our Band Show, spelled as it sounds as it's spelled. And yeah, just find that through the link in the bio. We have the finale of Talking Thrones coming out on the channel next week.
Yes, we do.
Please
Final episode. Oh man, I'm considering putting that up on YouTube. You know, obviously, again, we've been putting Talking Thrones out pretty much exclusively on audio, but this last one was so good with the bells and then leading into the Iron Throne. I might have to put it on YouTube. I haven't decided yet because I still have the video copy, but we will decide that when it comes. So you can, of course, follow myself at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow the official Talking TV podcast across all platforms. Subscribe to us if you're watching us here on YouTube. Give us a follow if you're listening to us on Twitch. New episodes of the podcast are still being released on Mondays on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and any other place where you can listen to podcasts. We're still going to put out new episodes all the way up until the end of the year because we still got a couple big projects we want to talk about. We got Halloween Ends, which seems to have like fallen by the wayside as far as marketing goes. That should already tell you what that movie's going to be like next week. Maybe that could be our crappy horror movie of the year that we cover. And Black Adam before we wrap out October. And then again, we've got some big ones. We got Glass Onion, we got Avatar 2, we got Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, we got a Disney movie and a Spielberg movie at Thanksgiving. We still got a lot of stuff that we got to cover before the end of 2022 in order to signify where the rest of the 2020s are going to be going as movies. You can follow that all right here on the Talking TV podcast. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film and watch more fucking movies. See you guys next time.